There's something peculiar about the way our children grow up when we're not watching. One day you're teaching them to tie their shoelaces and count their allowance money, and the next thing you know, they're calling you from some far-off place. Their voices bubbling with excitement about adventures that make your wallet feel lighter just listening to them. That's exactly how I felt that particular afternoon in late spring, sitting in my home office with a cup of coffee growing cold beside me. The sun was doing that lovely thing it does around 4 o'clock, streaming through the windows in golden ribbons that make even the most ordinary Tuesday feel like something special. My daughter Kayla's voice danced through the phone speaker with the kind of infectious joy that makes fathers both proud and quietly worried. "Dad, you should see this place," she was saying, and I could practically hear her bouncing on her toes the way she used to when she was 7 and had something wonderful to tell me. The presidential suite has this incredible wraparound balcony that overlooks a private beach. You can literally see dolphins from the bedroom window. Now, I've been a father for 29 years, which means I've developed what you might call a sixth sense about these things. It's like learning to read the weather. You start noticing the little shifts in barometric pressure that tell you a storm might be coming. Something in Kayla's voice had that particular quality that sets off gentle alarm bells in a parent's mind. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I said, setting down my pen and leaning back in my leather chair. "Which resort did you pick?" "The Oceanfront Grand in Key Largo," she replied without missing a beat. "It's absolutely perfect, Dad. They have this helicopter tour that takes you over the coral reefs, and tomorrow night we're dining at their 5-star restaurant. The chef trained in Paris." I found myself tapping my pen against the mahogany desk, a habit I developed during 30 years of business meetings where people told me things that didn't quite add up. Key Largo is beautiful, no question about it. I remembered Kayla mentioning wanting to visit there, probably after watching one of those travel shows that make every destination look like paradise. "Key Largo's lovely," I said, letting a comfortable pause settle between us. "I remember you mentioning wanting to visit there. How much is all this running, you and Ryan?" There it was, that tiny hesitation that parents learn to recognize. It's the same pause that happens when you ask a teenager about their homework or when you inquire about that dent in the car bumper. Just a fraction of a second too long, like someone shuffling through possible answers before settling on one. "Oh, you know how it is," Kayla said with a laugh that sounded just a little too rehearsed. "We've been saving up for months. Ryan got that bonus from his sales job, and I've been putting aside money for my work at the boutique. Now, here's the thing about being a parent. You know your children's lives sometimes better than they know them themselves. Ryan's sales job consisted of working about 3 hours a week at a car lot, showing the occasional customer around a used Honda. And Kayla's boutique work, bless her heart, was the kind of part-time position that might cover coffee money and not much else. But sometimes love means letting people tell you their stories, even when you can see the loose threads. "That's wonderful that you two have been so responsible with your finances," I said, and I meant it. There's nothing a parent wants more than to believe their child is making good decisions. "Yeah, well, we really wanted to do something special for our anniversary." I glanced at the calendar on my desk, though I already knew what I'd find there. "Your anniversary isn't until October, sweetheart." Another pause, this one longer. You could almost hear the gears turning. I meant our dating anniversary, from when we first met. That was in February, Kayla. "Dad, you're being so weird about this." The defensive edge that crept into her voice hit me, like a cold wind through an open window. Can't I just be excited about my vacation without getting the 3rd degree? And there it was, that moment every parent dreads, when the child you raised, the one who used to crawl into your lap with scraped knees and broken toys, suddenly sounds like a stranger. The little girl who once asked me to check under her bed for monsters had grown into a woman whose voice I barely recognized. "Of course you can, sweetheart," I said softly. "I'm just impressed by how much you've managed to save. A presidential suite at the Oceanfront Grand, helicopter tours, 5-star dining. That's got to be running close to $20,000 for the week." "It's not that much, Dad." "God, you make it sound like we're blowing our life savings." "I'm not criticizing, Kayla. I'm proud that you're being financially responsible. Look, I need to go pack. We're leaving for the airport in an hour. Have a wonderful time, sweetheart. Send me pictures." The line went dead, And I sat there staring at my phone the way you might stare at a photograph of someone you once knew well, but haven't seen in years. 29 years of fatherhood had taught me to read my daughter's moods like a farmer reads the sky before planting season. The nervous laugh when she mentioned Ryan's bonus, the way she stumbled over explaining which anniversary they were celebrating, the quick topic changes whenever I asked about money. It all pointed towards something I didn't want to believe. I set the phone down and opened my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard for a moment before I typed in my bank's website. Sometimes being a parent means hoping you're wrong while preparing to discover you're right. The login screen appeared, and I entered my credentials with the growing certainty that comes from putting together a puzzle you wish didn't exist. The afternoon shadows were lengthening across my office floor as I sat there, looking at numbers that told a story I didn't want to read. $20,000. Almost exactly the amount I'd mentioned, as if some part of me had known all along. My little girl was stealing from me. You know how sometimes you lose your keys and spend 20 minutes looking everywhere except the most obvious place? That's a bit like what I did for the next 3 days. I went about my usual routine, morning coffee, newspaper, checking on the garden, while carefully avoiding the one place I knew I'd find answers I didn't want. But truth has a way of demanding attention, rather like a persistent neighbor who keeps knocking until you finally answer the door. On the fourth morning, I found myself in my office with a fresh cup of coffee and the quiet determination that comes from knowing it's time to face facts. I pulled up my American Express statement, the one I'd been avoiding like a visit to the dentist. There's something almost ceremonial about opening financial documents when you suspect bad news. You take a deep breath, steel yourself, and dive in. American Airlines, $2,447. The date matched perfectly with Kayla's departure announcement. Oceanfront Grand Resort, $12,450. A presidential suite for a week, just as she described. Enterprise rental car, $890. Luxury convertible, no doubt. Blue water helicopter tours, $1,200. Those coral reef views she'd been so excited about. Paradise dining experience, $750. The chef who trained in Paris. I reached for my calculator, though part of me already knew the total. $18,137. Close enough to my $20,000 estimate to make my chest feel tight. Each charge appeared on the credit card I'd given Kayla 3 years earlier for emergencies. The same card she promised to use responsibly. The same card whose statements I'd stopped checking because, well, you trust your children. That's what parents do. My phone buzzed with a text from Kayla. Having the most amazing time. The suite is incredible. Along with a photo of a balcony overlooking pristine blue water. I screenshot the message, then dialed her number. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones we have to have. She answered on the fourth ring, sounding breathless and happy. Hey, Dad. What's up? Hi, sweetheart. How's Florida treating you? Oh my goodness, it's paradise. We just got back from the helicopter tour, and tonight we're going to that restaurant I told you about. Ryan's taking pictures of everything. That's wonderful. I'm so glad you two are enjoying yourselves. I clicked through to the next page of my statement, noting additional charges I'd missed earlier. Kayla, I need to ask you something. Sure, what's up? Are you using my credit card for this trip? Silence. For seconds of it, I counted. It's amazing how long 4 seconds can feel when you're waiting for your child to tell you the truth. What? No, Dad. Of course not. I told you we saved up for this. Are you sure? Because I'm looking at my American Express statement right now, and there are charges from your hotel, your flights, even the helicopter tour you just mentioned. That's impossible. Her voice took on that particular quality that comes when someone is thinking very fast. Maybe someone stole your card information. You should call the bank right away. It's funny how disappointment can feel both crushing and familiar at the same time. Like putting on a coat you hoped you'd never have to wear again. I'm sure that's what happened, I said, keeping my tone as neutral as Switzerland. I'll call them right now. Thank you for letting me know it wasn't you. Of course, Dad. I would never do something like that. You know I'd ask if I needed help with anything. I know you would, sweetheart. Enjoy the rest of your trip. Thanks, Dad. Love you. Love you too. I hung up and stared at my phone. The little girl who used to confess to breaking things before I'd even noticed they were missing had just lied to my face without a moment's hesitation. Not just evaded or dodged. She created an elaborate story about credit card theft and expressed what sounded like genuine concern for my financial security. That evening found me in my study, surrounded by photo albums I hadn't opened in years. There's something about family crises that makes you want to go back and examine the evidence, like a detective trying to figure out where things went wrong. The burgundy leather covers felt familiar under my fingers as I flipped through decades of memories. Here was Kayla at 5, gap-toothed and grinning beside her first bicycle, a pink princess model that had cost me 2 weeks' salary at the time. She'd seen it in the store window and declared it the most beautiful thing in the world. I'd worked overtime for a month to afford it. I turned the page. Kayla at 16, posing beside her first car. Not the reliable Honda I'd suggested, but the BMW convertible she'd begged for. Everyone at school has nice cars, Dad. I'll be so embarrassed if I don't. The car had cost $38,000. She'd totaled it 6 months later. Another page. Kayla's college graduation, her smile radiant under cap and gown. 4 years at Emory University, full tuition, room and board. $160,000. She'd changed majors 3 times and graduated with a degree in art history she'd never used. I closed that album and reached for another one. This one was smaller, less organized, pictures of Michael, my other child, though you wouldn't know it from the way he'd been raised. Here he was at his high school graduation, working part-time at a grocery store to save money for community college. His car was a 15-year-old Honda Civic he'd bought with his own money and maintained himself. The contrast was like looking at photographs from 2 different families. Michael had asked me for help exactly 3 times in his adult life. Once for a small loan when his car needed repairs, money he'd repaid within 2 months. Once for help with a security deposit on his first apartment, again, repaid promptly. The 3rd time was last year when he'd asked if I could help with his wedding expenses. Not demanded, not assumed, asked. And when I'd offered to pay for the entire wedding, he'd insisted on covering half himself. I opened my laptop and began compiling the financial records I'd been avoiding. Sometimes facing the truth requires adding up numbers you don't want to see. Kayla's college education, $160,000. Cars over the years, $73,000. Apartment deposits and rent assistance, $34,000. Credit card payments I'd made on her behalf, $28,000. The trust fund I'd established for her 25th birthday, $50,000, blown through in 18 months. Total, $345,000. Not including the countless smaller amounts, dinners, shopping trips, spa days, vacations I'd paid for without question. Michael's total, $8,500. Every penny repaid with interest. I pushed back from my desk and walked to the window. The neighborhood was quiet, with street lights casting long shadows across manicured lawns. This house, this life I'd built, it was all supposed to be for them, for my children. To give them opportunities I'd never had. Instead, I created a situation where one child learned the value of hard work and self-reliance, while the other learned that Dad would always be there to clean up the mess. The photo album still lay open on my desk, showing 2 paths diverging from the same starting point. Tomorrow, Kayla would return from her stolen vacation, expecting everything to continue as it always had. She'd probably already started planning her next financial request, but something had shifted inside me during these past few days. The hurt was still there, but it was crystallizing into something harder, more purposeful. My daughter needed to learn that actions have consequences, that stealing from family, from anyone, wasn't acceptable, and I was going to be the one to teach her. There's something to be said for the therapeutic value of methodical action when your heart is breaking. The next evening, I settled into my living room with my laptop open and phone within reach, feeling rather like a general planning a campaign. Though I suppose that's not quite right. Generals fight enemies, and Kayla was still my daughter, still the little girl I tucked in every night for years. I opened Kayla's Instagram story, watching her document her stolen paradise in real time. There she was in the airport departure lounge, radiant under those unflattering fluorescent lights. Finally airborne. Florida, here we come. Hashtag bless life. The next story showed their presidential suite. Hashtag living my best life. Then a champagne toast with a hashtag that made my jaw clench. Hashtag daddy's girl. At 11:47 p.m., her story updated with a blurry photo of lights far below, somewhere over the Atlantic. Can't wait to see our suite. I waited another 30 minutes, then opened my contacts and dialed the Oceanfront Grand Resort. Oceanfront Grand, this is Marcus speaking. How may I help you? Good evening, Marcus. I need to cancel a reservation. Presidential suite checking in tomorrow under the name Kayla Foster. I'd be happy to help you with that, sir. May I have the confirmation number? I read it from my bank statement. The reservation was made with my credit card without my authorization. I'm canceling it immediately. Understand, sir. I see the reservation here. Unfortunately, the presidential suite has a strict 72-hour cancellation policy. The full amount is non-refundable at this point. That's fine. Please proceed with the cancellation. Certainly, sir. The reservation has been canceled. The cardholder should receive a confirmation email within the next few minutes. Next, I called Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Same story, same professional courtesy. The luxury convertible Kayla had reserved was no longer available. Yes, there would be a cancellation fee. Yes, I understood and approved. Blue Water Helicopter Tours was next. I'm sorry, sir, but we can only issue a partial refund since you're canceling within 24 hours of the scheduled tour. You'll receive about 40% back. That's acceptable. Please proceed. Each call followed the same pattern. Polite explanations, professional understanding, and the systematic dismantling of my daughter's elaborate vacation plans. The paradise dining experience. The private beach cabana rental. The deep-sea fishing charter. One by one, they vanished from existence. My phone buzzed with confirmation emails. Canceled. 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 The final step was perhaps the most satisfying. I logged into my American Express account and navigated to the Authorized User section. Kayla Foster, remove user. The system asked if I was sure. I clicked confirm with more satisfaction than I'd felt in years. By 2:30 a.m., it was done. Every luxury service, every upgrade, every indulgence had been systematically canceled. Kayla would land in Miami tomorrow morning to find herself with nowhere to stay, no transportation, and no way to pay for alternatives. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, a good single malt I'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed to qualify. I sat back in my chair, looking out at the quiet street where normal families live their normal lives. My phone was silent now, but I knew that would change soon. Very soon. I went to bed that night with a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. Justice isn't always swift, but when it arrives, it tends to be thorough. My phone began its urgent buzzing at exactly 6:23 a.m. Kayla's name lit up the caller ID like a distress signal. I let it ring, continuing with my morning coffee ritual as if nothing unusual was happening in my carefully ordered world. I woke up naturally at 7:30. No alarm needed when you've slept the sleep of the righteous. The morning sun was doing that lovely dance through my bedroom curtains, and I could hear birds having their daily conference in the oak tree outside my window. The newspaper waited on my front step like an old friend. It wasn't until I returned with the paper that I noticed my phone screen glowing with notifications. 15 missed calls, all from Kayla. The first had come at 6:23 a.m. The most recent at 7:41 a.m., just minutes ago. I poured my coffee and took a slow, appreciative sip before picking up the phone. It immediately began ringing in my hand, as if it had been waiting for exactly this moment. Morning, sweetheart. You're up early. Dad. Her voice was careful, probing, like someone testing the temperature of bathwater. Were you having trouble with your credit card yesterday? Trouble? No. Why do you ask? I tried to... when we checked into the hotel, there seemed to be some kind of issue with the reservation system. The front desk said something about payment problems. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at Mrs. Patterson's garden, where her roses were beginning their spring show. That's strange. My card's been working fine. Let me check it right now. I made a show of rustling around for my wallet, though I already knew exactly what I'd find. Nope, everything looks normal. Maybe I should test it to be sure. Dad, you don't need to. No, this is concerning. If there's fraud on my account, I need to know immediately. I drove to the ATM 2 blocks away, taking my time and enjoying the morning air. Spring has always been my favorite season. Everything starting fresh, new possibilities around every corner. When I returned 15 minutes later, I called her back. All good on my end, sweetheart. The card works perfectly. Maybe it was just a computer glitch at your hotel. Silence. Then, yeah, maybe. I finished my coffee and scrambled some eggs, humming an old tune my father used to whistle while he worked in his garage. The phone rang again at 9:15. This time, Kayla's voice was different, higher-pitched, with that particular strain that comes from a sleepless night and growing panic. Dad, something's really wrong. The hotel says our reservation was canceled last night. They're saying someone called and canceled everything. That's terrible. Did they say who called? They said it was the cardholder, but that's impossible because we paid for everything ourselves, remember? I set down my fork and leaned back in my chair. Of course I remember, Kayla. You told me you and Ryan had saved up for this trip. We did. So why would the hotel think the cardholder canceled? It doesn't make any sense. I have no idea, sweetheart. Where are you staying now? Some terrible motel off the highway. Dad, this place is disgusting. The air conditioning barely works, and there are stains on the carpet that I don't even want to think about. I'm so sorry this happened to you both. The rental car got canceled too, and the helicopter tour, and our dinner reservations. Everything just vanished. I made sympathetic noises while internally marveling at the efficiency of last night's work. Dad, her voice dropped to a whisper. You wouldn't have. Wouldn't have what, Kayla? Nothing. Never mind. But I could hear it in her voice, the first seeds of suspicion taking root. She was starting to put the pieces together. Actually, Dad, I need to ask you something directly. Of course, sweetheart. Ask me anything. Did you cancel our reservations? The question hung in the air between us like morning mist waiting for the sun to burn it away. I set my coffee cup down slowly, considering my response. The time for gentle games had passed. Yes, I did. 7 seconds of silence. I counted them. What? What do you mean, yes? I mean, yes, Kayla. I canceled every reservation, every tour, every service you booked with my stolen credit card. Stolen? Dad, I didn't steal anything. I just borrowed $18,137. My voice remained perfectly level, the way it did during difficult business negotiations. American Airlines, April 15th. Oceanfront Grand Resort, April 15th. Enterprise Rental Car, April 16th. Should I continue? Dad, you don't understand. It was just a temporary thing. I was going to pay you back. With what money, Kayla? Your part-time boutique job that pays $9 an hour? Ryan's 3-hour-a-week car lot position. We have savings. No, you don't. You have my money that you took without asking. That's called theft. Her breathing grew ragged. Fine. So I used your card. So what? You're my father. It's not like I'm some stranger. Being my daughter doesn't give you the right to steal from me. I wasn't stealing. God, you're being so dramatic. It's family money anyway, right? I mean, what's yours is mine eventually. So what's the big deal if I take some of it now? The casual entitlement in her voice hit me like a physical blow. 29 years of love and sacrifice reduced to an inheritance expectation. Eventually? Kayla, you're not entitled to anything I've earned. Come on, Dad. Don't be like this. You've always helped me out before. This is just bigger. How much bigger, Kayla? What do you mean? This isn't the first time, is it? The silence told me everything I needed to know. Kayla, how much bigger? I don't know what you're talking about. Try again. I walked to my computer and began pulling up older statements, my heart sinking with each click. Because if you've been doing this for months, I need to know exactly how much damage we're talking about. Dad, you're scaring me. Why are you being like this? Because my daughter is a thief, and I'm just now realizing how extensive the operation has been. Don't call me that. Then tell me the truth. How long have you been using my car without permission? Silence. Then, in a very small voice, it's not. I mean, it was just little things sometimes. Dinner's out, or when I needed gas, or how long, Kayla? Maybe a few months. But Dad, it was never anything big. just when I needed help, and I knew you'd say yes anyway if I asked. A few months. My hands began to shake with suppressed rage as I scrolled backward through the statements. January. Lou Bernardine in New York, $347. I remembered asking her about her weekend in the city. She'd said her friend had paid for dinner. December. Nordstrom, $892. The shopping trip for job interview clothes that her savings had supposedly covered. November. Four Seasons Atlanta, $445. The girls' night spa weekend that had been such a great deal. October. Louis Vuitton, $1,200. The purse that had been a gift from Ryan. September. Multiple restaurants, beauty treatments, shopping sprees, all charged to my card, all explained away with elaborate lies. I reached for my calculator and began adding. The vacation was just the tip of the iceberg. Total unauthorized charges over 6 months, $23,471. Almost $24,000, stolen piece by piece while she looked me in the eye and lied about her independence, her savings, her responsibility. So instead of asking your father for help like a normal person, I said, my voice deadly calm, you decided to steal from me for months. I'm going to pay it all back. With what money? You can't even hold down the part-time job you have now. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? My voice was rising now, and I didn't care. Fair would have been asking for help. Fair would have been respecting the man who raised you, fed you, clothed you, and paid for your entire existence for 29 years. You're being horrible. I'm being honest, and clearly that's something you're not used to hearing. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a moment, then walked directly to my filing cabinet. If she'd been stealing for months, I needed to understand the full scope of her betrayal. I pulled out folders of financial records I'd been meticulously keeping for years, the kind of documentation that makes accountants weep with joy. The numbers climbed steadily as I went back further into our financial history. Not just the unauthorized charges, but the pattern they revealed. Every loan I'd made that was never repaid. Every emergency that turned out to be a luxury. Every promise to pay me back that had evaporated like morning dew. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the evidence spread across my desk. My daughter hadn't just betrayed my trust. She'd been systematically taking advantage of my love for years, growing bolder with each successful theft. But you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the money. It was the realization that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being her father and had become nothing more than an ATM with a heartbeat. I needed air, space, something other than bank statements, and the growing realization that I'd raised someone I didn't recognize. I moved to the living room and collapsed into my leather recliner. The same chair where I'd read Kayla bedtime stories 20 years ago, back when she believed I could fix anything and protect her from all the monsters in the world. My phone sat beside me, and almost without thinking, I opened Instagram. The app loaded to a notification. Kayla Foster posted to their story. Curiosity, they say, killed the cat. Sometimes it just wounds the father. I tapped the notification. The screen filled with shaky video footage of what looked like a highway motel that had seen better decades. Kayla's voice narrated over images of peeling wallpaper and a flickering bathroom light. So this is where my father has forced me to stay on what was supposed to be my dream vacation. The camera panned across water stains on the ceiling. Thanks to his controlling, manipulative behavior, this is my reality now. I watched in growing horror as she continued the tour. The threadbare carpet, the broken air conditioning unit, the view of a parking lot filled with semi-trucks. When the video ended, more story bubbles appeared like mushrooms after rain. The next one was a photo of her face, mascara-streaked, eyes red from crying. The caption read, "When your own father sabotages your happiness because he can't stand to see you succeed. Hashtag toxic parents, hashtag financial abuse." Another story, a long text post over a black background. Growing up with a father who uses money to control every aspect of your life. Who promises love but delivers conditions. Who can't bear to see his children independent or happy. Hashtag trauma talk, hashtag generational trauma, hashtag narcissistic parents. The comments were already pouring in like water, through a broken dam. Girl, cut him off completely. You deserve so much better than this. Toxic parents never change. Go no contact ASAP. Sue him for emotional damages. I kept scrolling, watching my daughter systematically destroy my reputation in real time. Story after story, each one painting me as an abusive, controlling monster who had ruined her life out of pure spite. The final story was a direct video message to the camera, and this one made my blood run cold. To everyone asking what happened, she began, looking directly into the lens with wounded, brave eyes. My father has always been like this. Growing up, he would promise things and then take them away if I didn't behave exactly how he wanted. Nothing was ever unconditional with him. She paused, wiping away what looked like a genuine tear. And now, as an adult, he's still trying to control me by canceling my vacation that I worked so hard to afford. She worked so hard to afford, with my stolen money. He can't stand that I'm independent now, that I don't need him anymore. So he decided to punish me by calling my hotel and pretending there were problems with payment. He sabotaged everything out of pure malice. Independent. The woman who had stolen nearly $24,000 from me was calling herself independent. I'm sharing this because I know other people have parents like this, and I want you to know you're not alone. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally are the ones who hurt us the most. The video ended with her looking directly into the camera with those wounded, brave eyes that had gotten her out of trouble since she was 5 years old. I closed the app and set the phone down with shaking hands. In the span of 3 hours, my daughter had stolen from me, lied to me, publicly humiliated me, and painted herself as the victim of my abuse. She turned a simple case of theft and consequences into a social media campaign designed to destroy my reputation while garnering sympathy for herself. The comments were still coming in, hundreds of them now, from strangers who knew nothing about the situation except Kayla's version of events. Strangers who were now convinced I was a monster. Strangers who had never seen the college tuition receipts, the car payments, the endless stream of emergencies I'd funded without question. I looked around my living room at the family photos scattered across the mantelpiece. Kayla at her high school graduation. Kayla at her college graduation. Kayla's birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations, all paid for by the man she was now calling abusive on the internet. If Kayla wanted to portray me as the villain, she was about to learn what that actually looked like. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer's office. Henderson and Associates, this is Rebecca. Rebecca, this is Raymond Foster. I need to schedule an emergency appointment with Jim first thing tomorrow morning. Of course, Mr. Foster. May I ask what this is regarding? I looked at the photo on my mantelpiece, Kayla's sweet 16 party, where she'd hugged me and whispered that I was the best dad in the world. Trust fund modifications, I said, and will changes. The next morning found me in Jim Henderson's office at exactly 9 o'clock, wearing my best business suit and carrying a leather portfolio that felt heavier than it should have. Jim had been my attorney for 15 years, handling everything from business contracts to my divorce. He was one of the few people I trusted completely, which, given recent events, felt like a precious commodity. Raymond, he stood and extended his hand, his expression appropriately serious. Rebecca said this was urgent. What can I do for you? I opened my portfolio and placed the bank statements on his mahogany desk like evidence in a trial. I need to modify a trust fund and make changes to my will. Jim settled back in his chair, fingers steepled in that way lawyers do when they're preparing to hear something significant. All right, which trust are we talking about? The one I established for Kayla's 30th birthday. $200,000, currently set to vest next year. I remember that trust. What kind of modifications are you considering? I slid the bank statements across the desk. I want her removed as beneficiary entirely. The money should go to Michael instead. Jim picked up the papers and began scanning them, his eyebrows climbing steadily as he took in the highlighted charges. These are all unauthorized. Every single one. 6 months of systematic theft, culminating in an $18,000 vacation she took without my knowledge or permission. Have you discussed this with her? Yesterday. She admitted to it, justified it by saying it was family money anyway, and then spent the evening destroying my reputation on social media. I pulled out my phone and showed him screenshots of Kayla's Instagram stories. She's painting me as an abusive parent for having the audacity to cancel the vacation she purchased with my stolen money. Jim read through the posts, his expression growing more grim with each screenshot. "This is quite extensive," Jim said, his voice carrying that particular tone lawyers use when they're looking at something that troubles them professionally. "She's really committed to this narrative. Committed enough that I've decided she needs to learn about real consequences. I want her completely removed from my will as well." Jim set down the phone and leaned forward, his expression shifting from professional interest to genuine concern. "Raymond, I have to ask, are you certain about this? These are permanent changes we're talking about. Family relationships can heal over time, but legal documents are much harder to undo." I straightened in my chair, feeling the weight of 29 years of parenting settle on my shoulders like a familiar but heavy coat. "She stole nearly $24,000 from me, Jim. Then she lied about it. Then she publicly accused me of abuse for stopping her from stealing more. At what point do I stop enabling her behavior and start protecting myself?" "I understand your anger." "This isn't anger," I interrupted, though perhaps it was seasoned with disappointment and sorrow. "This is justice. I've compiled a list of previous loans and gifts over the past 5 years. I pulled out another document from my portfolio. $345,000, Jim, not including her education." Jim whistled low, the kind of sound you make when someone tells you they've been struck by lightning twice in the same week. "That's a significant amount. She's never paid back a single penny, never even offered to. And now I find out she's been stealing on top of all the money I've freely given her." I leaned back in my chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 58 years. She's made it clear that she sees me as nothing more than an ATM with a pulse, so I'm removing her access to that ATM permanently. Jim was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents like an archaeologist examining artifact from a lost civilization. "What about attempts at family mediation? Family therapy? Sometimes these situations can be resolved through." "You can't mediate with someone who feels entitled to steal from you," I said, and the words came out harder than I'd intended. "And you certainly can't trust them with a $200,000 inheritance. What does your son think about all this?" "Michael doesn't know yet. I plan to call him this afternoon." I straightened in my chair, feeling more certain with each word. "Michael has never asked me for anything he didn't desperately need, and he's always paid me back with interest. He deserves to benefit from my hard work, not the daughter who's been systematically robbing me." Jim nodded slowly, the way people do when they're processing something that makes perfect sense but feels deeply sad at the same time. "All right, if you're certain this is what you want, I can draft the modifications. The trust fund change will require a 30-day waiting period and notification to all current beneficiaries. The changes can be executed immediately." "How long before everything takes effect?" 6 weeks for the trust modifications to be legally binding. The changes are effective as soon as you sign them. "And she'll be notified?" "She'll receive legal notice of the trust fund changes, yes. It's required by law." I smiled for the first time in days. "Perfect. I want her to know exactly what her choices have cost her." 2 hours later, I walked out of Henderson & Associates with a thick folder of legal documents and a profound sense of having finally taken action after months of being passive. Kayla's trust fund, the safety net I'd created to help her start her adult life, was now designated for Michael, who had actually earned it through years of respect and responsibility. Mine no longer contained her name anywhere. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a moment, holding the documents that would change everything. In 6 weeks, Kayla would receive a formal legal notice that she'd been disinherited. She'd learn that choices have consequences that extend far beyond a canceled vacation. She wanted to be independent. She was about to get her wish. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Michael's number. It was time to let him know that his integrity and character had finally been rewarded, though I suspected he wouldn't see it quite that way. Michael had always been the type to look for the good in people, sometimes to a fault. The red light at 5th and Main gave me time to dial. I sat there watching other drivers rush through their Wednesday afternoon routines. People heading home from work, picking up groceries, living their normal lives while I navigated this strange new reality where I had to legally protect myself from my own daughter. Michael answered on the second ring, sounding slightly out of breath. "Hey, Dad. What's up?" "Hi, son. I have some important news to share with you. Are you somewhere you can talk?" "Sure. I'm just finishing lunch at work. Is everything okay? You sound—" He paused, and I could almost hear him choosing his words carefully. "You sound different." I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine, gathering my thoughts like a man preparing to explain a natural disaster to someone who'd been away when it happened. "I need to tell you about some changes I've made to my will and to Kayla's trust fund." Silence on the other end. Then, cautiously, "Dad, what's going on?" "Michael, I'm transferring Kayla's $200,000 trust fund to you, and I've removed her from my will entirely." "What?" The word came out like a physical collision. "Why would you?" "Dad, what happened?" I walked into my house, settling into my office chair where all of this had begun just a few days earlier. Kayla has been stealing from me for months. Nearly $24,000 in unauthorized charges on my credit card. That can't be right. Michael's voice carried that particular quality of someone trying to reject information that doesn't fit with their understanding of the world. "Kayla wouldn't." "She admitted it, Michael. I have all the documentation right here." "But—" He trailed off, and I could hear him processing. "Would you like me to go through the charges with you?" "Yes. I need to understand what you're saying." I read through the list methodically. The restaurants, the shopping sprees, the hotels, the vacation. Each charge with its date and amount. Like entries in a ledger of betrayal. Michael grew quieter with each item, and by the time I finished, the silence stretched between us like a bridge neither of us wanted to cross. "And when you confronted her about this," he finally asked, "she said it was family money anyway, and that she was just borrowing. Then she spent yesterday posting on Instagram about what an abusive, controlling father I am." Michael was quiet for a long moment. I could hear office sounds in the background. Phones ringing, conversations, the normal hum of people going about their business while my family fell apart. "Dad, when was the last time you talked to Kayla? I mean, really talked to her?" "Before this week? Probably 2 months ago. She called asking about refinancing her car loan." "Yeah." His voice was soft, sad. "We don't really talk anymore either. Not since she started dating Ryan seriously. She's changed a lot, Dad. She used to be different." "I know she was, but people become who they choose to become, Michael. And she's chosen to become someone who steals from family, and then plays the victim when there are consequences. This trust fund thing, though." He paused, and I could hear him struggling with something. "Dad, I don't feel right about taking money that was meant for her." This was exactly what I'd expected from Michael. The same integrity that had gotten him into this situation in the first place. "Son, you've never asked me for anything you didn't absolutely need. You've paid back every penny I've ever loaned you, with interest. You work 60 hours a week to support your family, and still find time to help your neighbors." I leaned back in my chair, looking at the family photos on my desk, pictures of 2 children who'd somehow grown into 2 completely different adults. Kayla works 15 hours a week and believes I owe her a luxury lifestyle. Which one of my children deserves to inherit the results of my hard work? When you put it like that, I'm not punishing Kayla out of spite, Michael. I'm rewarding you for being the man I raised you to be. There's a difference. We talked for another 20 minutes about practical details, the legal timeline, the notification process, how his own family was likely to react to this unexpected windfall. Sarah, his wife, had always been careful with money, and I suspected she'd want to put most of it toward their children's education funds. "What happens now?" he asked as our conversation wound down. "Does she know about this yet?" "She'll receive legal notification when she gets back from her stolen vacation. I expect that conversation will be unpleasant." "Dad, be careful. Ryan's got a temper when he doesn't get his way, and if there's this much money involved—" "I'm not afraid of Ryan." "I know you're not, but maybe you should be prepared for them to react badly. Maybe have Mrs. Patterson keep an eye out, or let the neighbors know there might be some family drama." I looked out my window at Eleanor Patterson's house, where where she was tending her garden with the methodical care of someone who understood that good things require consistent attention. They can react however they want, Michael, but they can't steal from me anymore. And they can't manipulate me into enabling their behavior. Are you sure about this? Really sure. I gathered the legal documents scattered across my desk, proof positive that I'd finally chosen character over blood, integrity over family obligation. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. 3 days later found me driving through the familiar streets of Kayla's neighborhood. A manila envelope on my passenger seat containing documents that would speak louder than any conversation we might have. There's something almost ceremonial about hand-delivering life-changing news. It feels more significant than email or certified mail, more personal than having a process server do the work. I pulled up to her apartment complex, one of those modern developments where everything looks expensive but nothing feels permanent. The kind of place young professionals live when they want to appear successful but haven't quite figured out how to actually become so. I slipped the envelope into her mailbox and drove home, feeling strangely calm. Legal language has a way of cutting through manipulation and getting straight to the truth. When Kayla opened that envelope, there would be no room for interpretation, no way to twist the facts into something more palatable. The call came at 2:47 p.m. the following Tuesday. I was in my study, reading a book about the history of the American West, something peaceful and removed from modern family drama, when my phone rang with a particular urgency that meant trouble was calling. What the hell is this? Kayla's voice was shaking with rage before I'd even said hello. Legal documents. I replied calmly, marking my place in the book with a leather bookmark. I assume you've read them. You can't do this. You can't just steal my money. Your money. The irony was so thick you could have served it for dinner. Kayla, you just spent the last week vacationing on my stolen money, and now you're accusing me of theft? That trust fund was mine. You promised it to me. I promised it to the daughter I thought I was raising. That person doesn't seem to exist anymore. Dad, you have to change this back. Please. Her voice shifted from anger to desperation so quickly it gave me emotional whiplash. You don't understand. Ryan's already made plans for that money. We were going to buy a house, start a family. Plans made with stolen money tend to fall through, sweetheart. The line went quiet except for muffled conversation in the background. I could hear Ryan's voice getting louder, though I couldn't make out the words. We're coming over, Kayla said finally. We need to talk about this face to face. No, we don't. Yes, we do. We'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat in my study for a moment, then walked through my house, making sure all the doors were locked. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones we need to protect ourselves from. I didn't have to wait long. 17 minutes later, my front door shook under aggressive pounding that would have woken the dead. Ryan's voice carried through the wood with all the subtlety of a freight train. Open up, Raymond. We need to talk. I opened the door to find them both standing on my porch like a pair of door-to-door salesmen, selling something I definitely didn't want to buy. Kayla's face was blotchy from crying, her mascara creating dark tracks down her cheeks. Ryan's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. This is insane, Ryan said, pushing past me into my living room without invitation. You can't just take away money that isn't yours. Ryan, this is my house, I said mildly. You don't get to barge in here and make demands. That trust fund belongs to Kayla. No, I said, closing the door but leaving it unlocked just in case I needed witnesses or help in a hurry. It belonged to the person I thought Kayla was. It turns out I was mistaken about her character. Kayla collapsed onto my couch. The legal papers crumpled in her hands like tissues after a crying jag. Dad, please. I'm sorry about the credit card thing. I'll pay you back. I swear. I'll get a better job, work more hours. I'll do whatever you want. What I want, I said, sitting down across from her, is a daughter who doesn't steal from me and then lie about it. Ryan stepped closer, his voice dropping to that particular whisper that men use when they want to sound threatening. You're going to fix this, old man. You're going to call your lawyer and undo whatever legal bullshit you've pulled. Or what? Or you're going to find out what happens when you mess with the wrong people. I pulled out my phone, not to call anyone, but to let him see that I could if needed. Are you threatening me in my own home, Ryan? I'm telling you how things are going to go. That's when Eleanor Patterson appeared in my doorway, like an angel of mercy wearing a gardening apron. Mr. Foster, is everything all right over here? I heard yelling. The presence of a witness transformed the room instantly. Ryan stepped back, his aggressive posture shifting to something more socially acceptable. Kayla wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself into someone who hadn't been making demands and threats. Everything's fine, Mrs. Patterson, I said. Just a family discussion that got a little heated. She looked between Ryan's red face and Kayla's tear-streaked appearance with the sharp eyes of someone who'd raised 4 children and knew family drama when she saw it. If you're sure. We were just leaving, Kayla said, standing up and shooting me a look filled with pure venom. Weren't we, Ryan? Ryan stared at me for a long moment, his jaw working silently like a man chewing words he couldn't quite bring himself to swallow. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said, keeping my voice level and calm. And if you threaten me again, I'll call the police. Is that clear? They left without another word, Ryan's shoulder deliberately bumping mine as he passed, a petty act of aggression that somehow made me feel sorry for him rather than angry. I watched through my window as they argued in their car before driving away, their voices loud enough to carry through closed windows but not clear enough to understand. Mrs. Patterson lingered in my doorway, her concern evident. Raymond, are you sure you're okay? That young man seemed very angry. Family problems, Eleanor. Nothing I can't handle. Well, if you need anything. She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. The neighborhood watch had officially been activated. Thank you. I appreciate the concern. After she left, I closed the door and turned the deadbolt for the first time in years. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline and the strange realization that I'd just been threatened by my daughter's boyfriend over money she'd stolen from me. I walked to my kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, looking out at the quiet street where normal families live their normal lives. Somewhere out there, Kayla and Ryan were planning their next move, but I'd already made mine. Eleanor lingered on my porch after Ryan and Kayla left, her gray eyes filled with the kind of concern that only comes from decades of watching over neighbors. Are you certain everything's all right, Raymond? That was quite a disturbance. Just some family disagreements about financial matters, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Nothing that can't be resolved through proper channels. She nodded, though her expression remained troubled. Well, you know where to find me if you need anything. Harold and I are always home in the evenings. After she left, I found myself standing alone in my living room, the echo of raised voices still hanging in the air like smoke from a fire that had just been extinguished. The house felt larger somehow, emptier. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, doubt crept in around the edges of my certainty. Had I been too harsh? Was there truth in Kayla's tears and her promises to change? She was still my daughter, still the little girl who used to make me Father's Day cards with crayon drawings of us holding hands under smiling suns. I spent the next 3 days in a strange kind of limbo, going through my usual routines while replaying the confrontation in my mind. The memory of Ryan's threat bothered me less than the image of Kayla's face when she'd read the legal documents. Raw desperation, complete shock, the look of someone whose world had just shifted on its axis. Maybe I should have tried family counseling first. Maybe I should have given her a chance to pay me back before involving lawyers. Maybe there was still time to find a middle ground that didn't require choosing between justice and mercy. On Friday morning, my doubts crystallized into action. I was actually reaching for my phone to call Jim Henderson about potentially reversing some of the legal changes when my doorbell rang with the particular insistence that means official business. A young man in a courier uniform stood on my porch with a clipboard and an official-looking envelope that made my stomach drop even before I knew what it contained. Raymond Foster? That's me. Please sign here. You're being served with legal papers. I signed mechanically and took the envelope, my fingers moving with the automatic precision of someone in shock. Inside was a formal lawsuit filed by Kayla Foster against Raymond Foster, alleging psychological abuse, financial manipulation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I read through the document slowly, my disbelief growing with each paragraph like a plant watered with bitter water. According to her complaint, I had systematically controlled and manipulated her through financial coercion for years. The trust fund she'd never earned was described as promised compensation for years of emotional abuse. My cancellation of her stolen vacation was characterized as malicious sabotage designed to cause maximum psychological harm. She was asking for $250,000 in damages. The lawsuit painted a picture of me as a monster who had psychologically tormented my daughter for decades, using money as a weapon to maintain control over her life. Every boundary I'd ever set, every consequence I'd ever imposed, was reframed as evidence of abuse. Reading her version of our relationship was like looking into a funhouse mirror where every normal parental interaction was twisted into something sinister. I set the papers down and walked to my filing cabinet, pulling out the folder I'd compiled of bank statements, canceled checks, and financial records. 29 years of supporting her education, her lifestyle, her mistakes. Hundreds of thousands of dollars freely given, no strings attached. The contrast was stark. Here was documentation of generosity spanning decades, and there was her legal claim that I'd been financially abusive. I called Jim Henderson immediately. "Raymond, I was expecting your call. I assume you've been served." "How did you know?" "Because this is exactly what happens when entitled people face real consequences for the first time. They attack." His voice was calm, professional, reassuring. "How are you holding up?" Honestly, I was starting to second-guess myself before this arrived. Now I'm remembering why I made these changes in the first place. Good, because this lawsuit is going to be easy to defend. You have documentation of voluntary financial support going back years, clear evidence of unauthorized use of your credit cards, and witness testimony about their threatening behavior. What about her claims of psychological abuse? "Raymond, setting boundaries with an adult child isn't abuse. Refusing to enable theft isn't manipulation. We'll present the facts and let them speak for themselves." We talked for another 20 minutes about legal strategy and timeline. When I hung up, I felt steadier, more certain of my course than I had since this whole ordeal began. I spread the lawsuit papers across my dining table next to my own documentation. The evidence was overwhelming. Every charge Kayla had made against my character was contradicted by decades of proof showing exactly the opposite. But as I organized my defense materials, something unexpected happened. Instead of the anger I'd expected to feel, a strange sense of peace settled over me like a warm blanket on a cold night. My daughter had just proven, in legal documents filed with the court system, that she was exactly who I'd thought she'd become. Someone who would lie, manipulate, and destroy family relationships rather than take responsibility for her choices. The doubt vanished like morning fog touched by sunlight. This lawsuit wasn't an attack on my character. It was vindication of every decision I'd made. I was still organizing documents, creating neat piles of evidence that told the story of our relationship better than any words could, when my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Unknown numbers had started to feel ominous, but something made me open it. The message was longer than my screen could display at once, requiring me to scroll down to read it all. The first line made me sit up straighter. "Dad, this is Kayla. I got a new number." I continued reading with growing surprise. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, but I need to tell you something important. I dropped the lawsuit this morning. I'm not fighting you anymore. I've had a lot of time to think over the past 2 months. Ryan and I separated 3 weeks ago. He was the one pushing for the lawsuit, said we could make you pay for disrespecting us. But sitting in that lawyer's office, listening to him talk about destroying you in court, I realized I didn't recognize myself anymore. I did steal from you. There's no other word for it. I took your trust and your money and then acted like you owed me even more. I convinced myself I deserved it because we're family, but that's not how family works, is it? You raised me better than this. I remember being proud of having a dad who worked so hard, who built something from nothing. Somewhere along the way, I started seeing your success as something I was entitled to instead of something I should try to earn myself. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now. I'm not asking for money or for you to change the trust fund back. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you were trying to teach me. Actions have consequences. Respect has to be earned. Family doesn't mean you get a free pass to hurt people. I'm getting my own apartment, working full-time at the boutique, and trying to figure out who I want to be without Ryan's influence or your safety net. It's scary, but maybe that's what I needed. I love you, Dad. I hope someday you can love me again, too. Kayla. I read the message 3 times, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agendas, the way a man who's been burned learns to check for fire before touching anything that looks warm. The tone was different from anything she'd written to me in years. No demands, no justifications, no attempts to minimize her behavior. Could people really change this dramatically? Or was this just a more sophisticated form of manipulation, the kind that comes from learning that direct confrontation doesn't work? I set my phone down and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the garden I'd been neglecting since this whole ordeal began. The roses needed pruning. The lawn needed attention. Life had continued moving forward while I'd been focused on legal battles and family betrayal. 2 months of silence. 2 months for both of us to process what had happened, to live with the consequences of our choices. Maybe that's what we'd both needed. Time to let the dust settle and see what remained when the emotional storm passed. My phone sat on the counter, waiting for a response that I wasn't sure how to give. I could text back immediately, begin the slow process of rebuilding trust and relationship. Or I could wait, let more time pass, see if this apparent change was genuine or temporary. I thought about Michael, the son who'd never needed dramatic consequences because he'd learned accountability early, almost by osmosis. I thought about Kayla, the daughter who'd somehow lost her way but might be finding it again. The afternoon light was fading, casting those long shadows that make ordinary rooms feel contemplative. I picked up my phone and reread her message one more time, then set it back down without responding. Some things couldn't be rushed. Trust, once broken, required time and consistent action to rebuild, like a bone that had been fractured and needed to heal slowly and carefully. If Kayla was truly changing, she'd understand that patience was part of the process. If she wasn't, she'd reveal herself by demanding immediate forgiveness and reinstatement. For now, the silence would continue, not out of cruelty, but out of wisdom earned through experience. I'd spent 29 years enabling her mistakes by making forgiveness too easy and consequences too soft. If she wanted a relationship with her father, she'd have to prove she was worthy of one. Time, as they say, would tell which daughter I'd be dealing with, the one who had stolen from me, or the one who had written this message. Until I knew for certain, the door would remain open, but the trust fund would stay exactly where it was. 6 months have passed since that text message arrived, and I find myself in a different place entirely, not just emotionally, but literally. I'm writing this from my new study in the house I bought closer to Michael and his family. It's smaller than my old place, more manageable, with a garden that doesn't overwhelm a man in his approaching 60s. Kayla kept her word about the silence. No more messages demanding immediate reconciliation, no social media campaigns, no lawyers bearing unreasonable lawsuits. She's working full-time at the boutique now. I hear this through Michael, who occasionally receives updates through the complicated network of mutual friends that exists in any family. She's also in therapy, according to these secondhand reports, learning to understand herself without the influence of people who encouraged her worst impulses. It's the kind of work that takes time, the kind of growth that can't be rushed or forced. Michael invested the trust fund money wisely, half toward his children's education, a quarter toward paying off his mortgage, and the remainder in a savings account for true emergencies. He sent me quarterly updates on the accounts, treating the inheritance with the same respect he's shown everything I've ever given him. My lawyer tells me that legally, everything is settled. The will remains unchanged, the trust fund transfer is complete, and there are no outstanding legal issues. But legal resolution and family healing are 2 different things entirely. Last week, I received a card in the mail. No return address, but I recognized Kayla's handwriting immediately. It was a simple note card the kind you find in grocery stores rather than expensive stationery shops. Inside, just 2 lines. Happy Father's Day, Dad. Thank you for loving me enough to let me fall. I've kept that card on my kitchen counter next to the coffee maker where I'll see it every morning. It reminds me that sometimes the hardest thing about being a parent isn't knowing when to catch your children when they stumble. Sometimes it's knowing when to step back and let them learn to catch themselves. The roses in my new garden are blooming beautifully this year. I tend them every morning before my coffee, enjoying the simple pleasure of nurturing something that responds to consistent care and attention. It's peaceful work, the kind that lets your mind wander while your hands stay busy. I think about Kayla sometimes during these quiet morning hours, wondering if she's learning the same lessons in her own life. That good things require patience, that trust must be earned rather than demanded, that love sometimes looks like consequences rather than endless second chances. I don't know if our relationship will ever fully heal. Some breaks leave permanent scars. Some betrayals change the fundamental nature of trust. But I do know that I made the right choice in teaching her that actions have consequences, even when those consequences broke both our hearts. That's what love looks like sometimes. Not the easy kind that enables and excuses, but the difficult kind that insists on better, even when better is painful to achieve. Especially then. The sun is coming up over my new neighborhood, painting the sky in those soft colors that make even ordinary Tuesday mornings feel full of possibility. I'll finish my coffee, check on the roses, and then call Michael to see how his family is doing. As for Kayla, well, she knows where to find me when she's ready. And when that day comes, if it comes, we'll both be different people than we were when this story began. Sometimes that's the best any of us can hope for. Author's note: this story explores the complex dynamics of family relationships, financial boundaries, and the sometimes painful process of teaching accountability to those we love most. While the specifics may be unique to this family, the underlying themes of enabling versus empowering, consequences versus forgiveness, and the evolution of parent-child relationships are universal experiences that many families navigate in their own ways. The narrator's journey from enabler to boundary setter isn't presented as the only correct path, but rather as one man's response to a specific set of circumstances. Every family dynamic is different, and what works in one situation may not work in another. The story's resolution, with its mixture of loss, growth, and tentative hope for future reconciliation, reflects the complex reality that family healing rarely follows a simple or predictable timeline. Most importantly, this tale reminds us that love sometimes requires saying no, that boundaries can be acts of compassion, and that the most difficult parenting decisions are often the ones that serve our children's long-term growth rather than their immediate happiness. In the end, perhaps the greatest gift we can give those we love is the expectation that they are capable of becoming their best selves, even when that means stepping back and letting them discover that capability on their own.